I'm looking at the Texas Family Code from the issue of divorce. Because in what happens in many of the instances, and what we hear over and over and over again, is that somebody divorced a spouse because of irreconcilable differences, but they fought for the kids. And so first off, the person who often was divorced said, but I don't find anything irreconcilable about our marriage. We can fix the marriage. And the other person says, I don't want to fix the marriage. But the other person has lawyered up. And the Texas Family Law Foundation and their attorneys, they're willing to take the case because, hey, maybe we can cause a little conflict, get some money, and rake you over the coals. But a lot of people found, to their horror and surprise, is basically the judgment was predetermined. There was going to be an outcome, and no matter how much you spent on attorneys and everything else, you were going to lose. And what happened was people did not just lose property, they lost their children. They lost their daily access to their children. And even in your case, Brandon, I hope you don't mind me mentioning it. If you do, let me know. But your children live not even a mile away from you, barely a mile away from you. And there should be no reason why your children should not be seeing you basically at will. You were not the one who wanted a divorce. It was forced upon you. You had to pay a lot of money, and you were deemed guilty for without reason. And the Attorney General basically, the family court judge, basically said you get to lose your children. And now the Attorney General, like it or not, is complicit, because if he's the officer of righteousness, he should be saying something's wrong with the system. But he finds out, and not just him, but his predecessor, our current governor, who I was told was even loved the system more than Attorney General Paxton, is that they like it because they can brag about how much money they're making and how they're standing up for kids and standing up for women. And in many instances, the women are the ones, and it's not a sexist issue. It happens to men too. But they cause the problem, and then the Attorney General's office assists them, in a sense.
And I would agree with that. However, my case is not what I've come to find out. My case is a run-of-the-mill thing. It has no bearing on what needs to change, other than the fact that everybody goes through the same thing.
Yeah.
Nothing about me going through it was unique.
Right.
But
you thought if you just told the judge the truth, everything would work out fine, right?
Well, the presumption is, and as I stated earlier, you're innocent until proven guilty. And then fairness is prevails, which is not what happens. And the reason I say the Attorney General is human trafficking, or at the very least complicit, is because I probably need to back up just a slide here. In the Texas Family Code, they separate access, and it's derogatory, but access and visitation is separate from support. And so they give you they divide it up, and they say, well, no, you get to keep all of your rights to your kids, but we're going to limit your access. And in that way we justify the money.
Yeah, yeah.
And I when this was pointed out to me, what I'm about to say was pointed out to me, I found that it opened my eyes. In 1996, Bill Clinton, through welfare reform, substituted the word non-custodial for absent parent. And so what Attorney General Paxton is doing, along with the Federal Child Support Enforcement Agency, is they are justifying child support to in the collection of it by having one absent parent. Now,
because the other parent is providing all of the services, and your job is to become a wallet to fund whatever lifestyle that new parent wants, but they do it under the guise of you have to take care of the children.
Well, but exactly.
Yeah.
So they're using the kids, and they're saying, well, you're non-custodial. Well, none of us know what non-custodial means. And even if you look it up in Black's Law Dictionary, it's going to refer you to, to a divorced parent. But it really ties back to that law. So when you go in there and you say, well, I want 50-50 custody, the state says, well, and actually this is what I was getting at, in the Texas Family Code, it is presumed to be the standard possession order is in the best interest of the child, which means you're an absent parent by default. Well, once they defaulted you as an absent parent, now they can justify the child support. Now,
so the best interest of the child is to kick you out of the child's life, or at least not completely, but you can have your little bit of time, but we don't want you to be a full-time parent. We want you to be maybe a 25% parent, and God forbid you don't pay your money, because now we're going to call you a deadbeat mom or a deadbeat dad. Is that kind of...
There you go. So yeah, I may have gone the long way around the tree.
Yeah.
But it's very important that people, for guys like me, Jeff has been impacted in other ways.
Right.
But and the people in these family right organizations, we've already been through it, and we're going to continue to fight the situation and shed light on what's going on. But really, we're trying to keep new people from getting railroaded by through the same techniques and fraud. I mean, really, it boils down to fraud, that they're fraudulently doing that.
So let me, as long as you mentioned my situation happens to be for my grandchildren. And I'll be damned if I'm going to sit back and let this happen to them without fighting. This whole system is wretched and evil. And I feel as a grandparent, if I am not fighting right now, if this happens to my grandchildren, that they get railroaded, I will have nothing to be able to say to them. I will fight for my grandchildren. I do not want to see this happen to them. And as long as we're talking about, we'll get back to this other thing in just a moment, but Children's Protective Services. That's what happened with me, is that I was out of state. Children's Protective Services inserted themselves into a situation because the Texas Family Code, this wonderful anti-family law document or lawlessness document, supposedly gave them permission to get in there. And somehow, in Brendan, in circumstances I can't describe, I ended up getting kicked out of my grandchildren's lives, even though Children's Protective Services stopped the investigation because I was a very strong safety net to my grandchildren. And Hank Whitman, I've met him. Hank Whitman, I hope you see this. I've talked to you man to man, veteran to veteran. I shook your hand. You made a promise to me 2.5 years ago, so you've yet to keep this. Children's Protective Services also destroys families. And I think that the problem is that these agencies, whether it's the Attorney General's office, whether the Children's Protective Services, they want money. They employ people. And how do they justify their existence in these areas? They have to have cases. So, and I hate to say this because it sounds almost conspiratorial, but it almost seems like there are certain provisions that almost encourage actions to create clients so that their worker bees can work and that the agencies can collect more money. And at the same time, they are destroying our families. They are destroying our children. You talked about, the human trafficking part. I look at the fact that when you have broken families, you have immediately set your kids up for greater risks in so many different areas. Divorce is transgenerational. You look at families where there's only one parent involved, you often have a greater risk of dropping out of high school, of getting involved in drugs, of teenage pregnancy, of gang activity, of going to jail, of never being in the top 20% economically, of being human trafficked, of having an abortion, all of these things. Drug abuse, alcohol abuse, all of these things happen. And our Texas Family Code seems to say, approved, next. Anyway, sorry for that rant, but kind of got a little bit off track here.
Well, it leads to the destruction of a society.
It does.
And the interesting thing, because I want to say, well, none of that's going to happen to my kids, Jeff, yeah, my wife, their mother wanted a divorce, fine. But I don't want all that stuff to happen to them, so I'm going to try to be in their life. And that's why 50-50 is a presumption.
Yeah.
We'll go make inroads in making sure that doesn't happen. But what it does is it sets back even further than the results.
Right.
Is the way they do that is when you remove the father from the home, or a mother, either one, that child now has lost what could be passed down. Each of us in our, I mean, just from a practical standpoint, can benefit from having a mentor in our lives, or someone who has already traveled and seen the wolves and the obstacles and the things that you could benefit from being shown. Hey, just let me explain why that's not a good idea.
Right.
To keep you from having to pay the price.
Right.
With with experience.
Right.
I mean, just let's walk through this together, and then you can be further down the road.
Right.
My children would be ahead of me.
Yeah.
I would be ahead of where I'm at in life.
Yeah.
Had my father not had to be away from home.
Yeah.
Now, he did it because of work, but and that was against, he just had to do what he had to do to provide for the family.
Right.
But in this situation with the Attorney General working in concert with the Texas Family Law Foundation,
yeah,
which is embedded within the Attorney General's office from what we're gathering.
Yeah. Well, Andrew Leote, the Associate Deputy Attorney, was also a member of the Texas Family Law Foundation.
Right, so they're working in partnership, and it's benefiting the attorneys, and it's benefiting everyone but the children that they're holding up to be looking out for the best interest of.